All right, let's jump right into this essential French A1 survival kit. Look, staring at endless vocabulary lists is completely overwhelming. So in this explainer, we aren't just going to memorize words. We are breaking down the actual pronunciation rules, common phrasing, and those crucial traps you absolutely need to know if you're tackling the TCF Canada exam. Plus, we'll sprinkle in some essential Quebecois variations to help you survive and thrive in places like Montreal or Quebec City.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Greetings and subject pronouns. 2. Core verbs and time. 3. Adjectives and everyday places. And 4. Family, food, and drinks.
Starting off with Section 1, Greetings and Subject Pronouns.
These right here are your fundamental tools for politeness. You've got your daytime greeting, bonjour, and your evening greeting, bonsoir. Now, in standard French, au revoir is your formal goodbye, and salut is super versatile. It works for both hi and bye in more relaxed settings. But if you're in Quebec, you're going to frequently hear allô used as a really casual hello, and not just when picking up the phone. And here is a quick TCF exam trap to watch out for. Avoid saying bon matin for good morning. It's an anglicism heavily used in Quebec, but the TCF graders? Yeah, they strongly prefer standard French.
Now check this out because it brilliantly illustrates a critical distinction in French, knowing exactly when to use formal versus informal language. For please, s'il vous plaît uses the formal vous, while s'il te plaît uses the informal tu. Here's a massive TCF exam tip for you. Pick one and stick to it. Mixing tu and vous when addressing the exact same person in your speaking or writing test will heavily penalize your score. Culturally though, just keep in mind that in Quebec, locals tend to switch to the informal tu way quicker than they do over in France.
Okay, the pronoun en is an absolute game changer, literally a massive shortcut for spoken French. While it technically translates to one, everyday francophones use it constantly just to mean we, a vital exam point here. Grammatically, en always takes the singular verb conjugation exactly like he or she, and you really need to watch your pronunciation on this one. When en is followed by a word starting with a vowel, you must make a liaison, seamlessly connecting that n sound to the very next word.
Rounding out our pronouns, we have il and elle for he and she, while nous is the formal we. For groups, ils is for a masculine or a mixed group, and elles is exclusively for a feminine group. Now here is a classic TCF listening trap. Since the S on the plural ils and elles is totally silent, how on earth do you know if the speaker means singular or plural? Well, you have to listen for that liaison. The singular il a sounds like il a, but the plural ils ont sounds like ils ont. That buzzing Z sound is literally your only clue.
Moving right along to Section 2, Core Verbs and Time.
Être, which is to be, and avoir, to have, are the absolute twin pillars of the French language. You absolutely must memorize their irregular conjugations for your exam. There's just no way around it. Furthermore, avoir and faire are used in some really heavy collocations. Think about it. In English, you are hungry, but in French, you have hunger. Avoir faim. In English, the weather is nice, but in French, the weather makes nice. Il fait beau. Mastering these specific verb pairings is an absolute must for sounding natural. So, let's focus in on the verb savoir. It specifically means knowing a fact or knowing how to do a skill, like swimming or driving. And this brings us to a guaranteed TCF exam trap, confusing savoir with the verb connaître. You use connaître for knowing people, places, or just being generally familiar with a subject. But if it's a hard fact or a learned ability, you've got to pull savoir from your toolbox.
These next power verbs really empower you to express your immediate needs. Comprendre ensures you actually understand directions when you're lost. But I have a major tip for your TCF speaking test. When you're using vouloir to want or pouvoir to be able to ask an examiner or a waiter for something, never use the blunt present tense. Instead of saying je veux, I want, use the polite conditional je voudrais, I would like. It scores so much higher on politeness and cultural awareness.
Once you've got your verbs down, you need to map them out in time. Hier for yesterday, aujourd'hui for today, maintenant for right now, and demain for tomorrow. But if you are hanging out in Quebec, there's another word you absolutely need to know, tantôt. It's used constantly by locals to mean either a little while ago or in a little while, entirely depending on the tense of the verb you pair it with.
You'll definitely want to memorize these time nouns, but take note of this awesome grammar point for your writing test. Unlike English, where we have to say in the morning or in the evening, French typically just uses the definite article. It's so clean.
To say I study in the morning, you simply say j'étudie le matin. Combining the simple structure with your verbs gives you a remarkable amount of precision very quickly.
All right, on to section 3, adjectives and everyday places. Listen up, because this is a golden rule. French descriptions must absolutely match the gender and number of the noun they are describing. This is a massive stumbling block for beginners, and literally the #1 place English speakers lose points on the TCF exam. If a noun is feminine, your adjective must take the feminine form. Let's look at exactly how that impacts both your spelling and your pronunciation.
Notice how dramatically these common descriptive words shift. Bon becomes bon. And when you add that feminine E to words like grand or petit, it triggers a crucial pronunciation change. In the masculine gall, the D is totally silent. But in the feminine grande, that E forces you to pronounce the D. Furthermore, words like beau and nouveau completely transform into belle and nouvelle just to align with feminine nouns.
You're going to use these vital adjectives to describe everything from the weather outside to your own physical state. But beware of a famous trap. To say you are hot or cold, you must use the verb avoir, to have, j'ai chaud. If you mistakenly use être and say je suis chaud, you are literally telling people that you are sexually aroused. Yeah, avoid that trap at all costs. Here is your geographical survival kit, giving you the nouns you need to navigate from intimate spaces like la chambre out to la rue, the street, and into la ville, the city. We've also included l'argent, which translates to both money and silver. A quick Quebec French note for you, you'll very often hear locals refer to money informally as du cash or coins as des cents, but definitely stick to l'argent for your formal exams.
So, we've covered actions, time, and locations, but what happens when you need to talk about your family or just sit down for a good meal?
That brings us to Section 4, Family, Food, and Drinks. This list covers your essential relationships, but you need to pay close attention to the traps here. First, pronunciation, la femme, meaning woman or wife, is pronounced femme, not femme. Second, in Quebec, you will rarely hear mon ami used for a romantic partner. Instead, they say mon chum for a boyfriend and ma blonde for a girlfriend. Finally, a massive warning. Les gosses means kids in France, but in Quebec, it's actually slang for testicles. Yeah, stick to les enfants to be safe. Here we have the absolute classics of French cuisine. L'eau for water, le pain for bread, and le fromage for cheese. But if you're eating these in Quebec, the actual names of the meals shift completely. In France, your meals are petit déjeuner, déjeuner, and dîner. But in Quebec, they are déjeuner for breakfast, dîner for lunch, and souper for dinner. Knowing this will literally save you from showing up to a restaurant at the entirely wrong time of day.
By simply combining the very first words we learned in this explainer today, you instantly possess a polite, culturally appropriate conversation starter. Bonjour, comment ça va? We've broken down vocabulary into manageable pieces today, avoiding the usual traps and really focusing on pronunciation. And this perfectly illustrates what happens when you put it all together to open real doors in the Francophone world.
You now have a solid, highly functional A1 survival kit. You aren't just memorizing lists anymore. You actually know the gender rules, the tricky pronunciation traps, and those key Quebecois nuances that will impress native speakers and TCF graders alike. So it's time to start combining these words into sentences out loud and ask yourself, are you ready to finally ace that exam or maybe even book that flight to Montreal? Thanks for joining me on this explainer and happy learning.